Okay, so here we are, the bit you've all been waiting for, effects. That's what After Effects is all about after all, isn't it? So we're going to have a look in this menu at effect categories. And if you want to follow along, you can open up Effects AEP, which is in the Effects folder. And the first comp we're going to work on is Effect Categories, so make sure you have that open. Now I've already applied some effects to my background layer. If you select it down in the timeline, hit E on the keyboard, that will open up all the effects that have been applied. And I can double click one of the ones in the list to open up my Effect Control panel. And this is where I can have a look in detail at the properties within the effects. Now here we have fractal noise, and if we switch off the effects, we can look at what they give to the background footage one by one. So I'm going to switch off all of the effects except fractal noise. And here you can see what fractal noise is contributing are these vertical lines to the background. Now just to make that a bit clearer, what I'm going to do is solo the layer so that we can only see the background layer. Okay, so that's fractal noise. Now if I reset fractal noise, you'll see its default setting is just to create this kind of noise. But I've messed around with the properties to create this kind of effect. So fractal noise is from the noise and grain section. In there you also have things like add grain to your footage, dust and scratches effect, and match grain for matching grain in your footage. You can also use it to remove grain. So that's from the noise and grain category. I've then applied on top of that Colorama, and Colorama is a great effect. It applies a set of colours to your footage, and you'll see I can choose from like a fire set of presets to Caribbean, which gives me a more watery kind of effect. And I've used that to apply colour to the background. So we've now got coloured stripes. And Colorama, and you'll see there's loads of different colour correction effects, including curves, levels, hue, saturation, that you would probably recognise from Photoshop. And then other ones you may not recognise, like CC Kernel, for example, Colour Neutralizer, and other colour effects. Then we have CC Tiler. And CC Tiler allows me to tile the lines that were created by fractal noise, so we get a repeating pattern. Now, if you, like me, forget where things are in the menus, like I can't remember where CC Tiler is, we can go over to Effects and Presets and type in Tiler, and it will bring up CC Tiler, which is, in fact, in the Distort section. And on top of that, I have CC Kaleida, or Kaleida, which creates this kind of kaleidoscope effect. And again, if I just type in CC, it will open up all the CC effects. Now, many of these have been updated in CS6, so they're 32-bit. And if we scroll down, you'll see we have them in all different categories: blurs and sharpens, channel effects, color correction effects. And if we scroll down, eventually we will find Kaleida, which is in the stylize category. And the stylize category is full of things that will make your footage just look amazing. Things like CC plastic, reptile, burn film, lots of effects to stylize your footage. Now on top of that, I have CC lens, which gives us this lens effect. And if I remember correctly, that's up here in the distort section. So another distortion effect applied on top of it. And you'll see that by layering the effects from different categories, I start to create my own personal effects. Now on top of that, I wanted to create a ramp effect, but unfortunately the ramp effect in After Effects, which creates gradients, doesn't have blending modes. So the effect that I use to create a ramp with a blending mode is 4-color gradient. And if I switch that on its own, you'll see basically what it does. It creates a dark to light gradient. It gives me 4 points, which is great, so I can create these diagonal gradients. And it also has blending modes, and if I switch that back on with all the others, you'll see what it's contributing. It's just darkening down the center a little bit and lightening up the edges. And I've adjusted the opacity to exaggerate the effect. You can choose multiply or something like that if you want a more subtle effect. But color burn gives me a really strong effect. So 4-color gradient, if we type in 4, is in the generate section. So it will generate a gradient for you. Now, then we have blurs. So I've used a radial blur here, which will blur more on the outside than on the inside. And I've changed the settings to give me a zoom blur. You can also have like a rotational blur, which will look more like something inside a washing machine. And that's from the blur section. If we have a look in there, there are lots of blurs like Gaussian blurs, radial blurs. Unsharp mask is also in there, so if you need to sharpen things, the sharpen plugins are also in there. And then on top of that, we have light rays, so a lighting effect, which gives us this nice kind of lighting effect on top of the other pieces of footage. And when we composite that with the other clips, you'll see we get some really, really nice effects. So that creates our background. If we select the midground, the girls dancing, I also have some effects on there. Other color correction effects include levels, which allowed me to boost the levels of that girl dancing, to brighten her up a bit, and then change the color, where I've taken the original color of her top, which was bright red, and changed it to a more complementary orange color. So I can just selectively change colors in the shot by using changed color. And then on the foreground, what I've done here is I've taken just a solid layer. Now, if I open up the opacity settings, you'll see I've brought down the opacity to 42%, and I've changed it to add mode. But if I put that back on normal and 100%, you'll see that I've applied something called bubbles. And bubbles will create these self-animating bubbles. And this is a procedural effect, so it goes through a procedure of animation without me having to set keyframes. And then I can do things like adjust the speed up here. So these are really handy because it means I have to do less keyframing. And then just to blend it in, what I've done is I've put that on add mode. And I get a nice light blend there. And I've brought the opacity down a little bit just to make it a little bit more subtle. And that's kind of like our fizzing fizzy drink, sending bubbles up as the girl is dancing. So that's a little run through of some of the effect categories. There are a load more that we haven't even covered, but what I want you to do is just have a look through these in your own time, and you can use the wonderful online help to give you a little example of each of these effects. So if you need help figuring out what any of these effects in these categories do, just go straight to the help menu, choose After Effects Help, and just do a search through the effects, and you'll see a little preview of each of the effects and a little description of what they do. The After Effects help really is your best friend. Well, maybe your second best friend or third best friend, because obviously me and Todd are your best friends in terms of After Effects help. But the online help comes a very close third. So that's a little bit about effects. Feel free to practice with some different effects on here as an experiment.